Do you feel lost, like you've wandered into a dense, shadowed wood, unsure of the path forward? Do distractions pull you from the still, small voice, leaving your soul restless and searching? Have you felt the weight of silence and wondered if God has left you alone? Here on the Distracted Christian Podcast, we walk that dark night together. Every step draws us closer to the one who's been waiting. His love is the light that guides, His grace, the compass that never fails. The cottage leaned slightly inward, as if the years had bowed it in prayer. Its timbers smelled of oak and winter damp. Its hearth was long and dark, ash scattered like old snow. A straw mat lay beside the pit, a bench beneath the windowless wall. Beside the door, a wooden hook held an empty cord where once a lamp had swung. 7 winters had passed here, winters of labor by day and silence by night. The walls had taken his breath and given it back slower. His absence from the world had shaped him. The earth floor was worn smooth beneath his feet, and the air held its peace. He sat cross-legged on the ground, spine straight as the beams above, palms open to the cold. Before him a clay bowl sat, the water sealed with a thin skin of ice. Once the flame had filled his mind with light, his will with warmth, his memory with wonders. Now all 3 stood emptied. His thoughts wandered like blind men in a fog. His will lay dormant. His memory could find no warmth even in prayer. No understanding to comfort him, no sweetness to move him, only the ache for a love he could not name, a union he had never fully known yet could not stop seeking. Outside, frost gave way under boots. Voices hushed but sharp slid through the window. "They say it happened in the plains of Nareth. Fire fell on the man. He communes with the flame itself." A second voice said, "I saw him lift a flame from dust like it knew his name." And the third voice, low and tight, added, "The folks say he's next to the Holy One himself. They travel all over just to see him." The quiet one's jaw tightened. Memories rushed back. Crowds thronging, withered men laughing in new strength, mothers clutching sons, the weight of holy fire in his hand, and it is all gone. Now that fire was imitated by this other. Several hours passed. Then a knock. An old priest leaned on the frame, face hollowed by years of journey. His eyes still held their old light, though dim like lanterns long kept in smoke. The quiet one drew him in. They spoke little. The priest coughed into his sleeve. The cloth came back stained. The quiet one laid him on a bench, covering him with wool. The candle in the corner flickered, its flame wavering like a breath between worlds. Between shallow breaths, the priest spoke. I've been looking for you, Starborn. Or Silent One, they call you now." A cough racked him. "Saw another flame from dust, light bent to his will, but false fire." His eyes shut. He drew in a breath. I saw it, and I knew I must find you. Illness has slowed me. Weeks." His voice cracked. "Heard whispers of a quiet man in the hills, a village nearby. I followed them here. The flame's true servant must know what walks in his place." Then his voice fell to a rasp. "The flame, he mimics it, but is not the flame, not the presence." The quiet one felt the words sink like stones into a dry well. "He says he can give back what was lost. The people The priest shut his eyes. They run to him, to fire, but not to truth. A cough shook him, and blood glistened in the light. The quiet one dipped a cloth in water and wiped the man's brow. It was several hours. At some point, the old man smiled faintly and then closed his eyes. He did not open them again. Before dawn, the quiet one took up his spade. The ground was frozen and resisted, but he did not stop. When the grave was ready, he laid the priest down without ceremony and pressed the final stone into place. He knelt there long after, palms upon the earth, feeling its chill and its weight. Inside, the presence still was silent and impressed differently, though. It was no longer the silence of waiting. It was the emptiness after something had been taken. In that absence, he felt the quiet tug, faint but certain, towards this Ash King. He did not know how he could stand against such a one. The 9 channels were close to him, yet guilt pressed on him for the years lost in hiding, and compassion rose for those misled by this false fire. The priest's warning still rang into his mind. They run to fire, but not to truth. So he gathered his satchel, tied up his cloak, and took his staff. At the door he paused, hand upon the frame. "Flame," he whispered, "let me go where you send me." And he stepped into the cold. What the quiet one finds in that small, bowed cottage is exactly the ground St. John of the Cross walks when he starts talking about the second, deeper night. The quiet one left the season where the flame felt easy. The flame left him, and he went into silence. Now he is sent into a world where the fake light can look like the real thing. And St. John says this is how God trains love. He moves us from sweet comforting to a purging that reaches sense and spirit together. So let's step out of the college with him and name what this night is. St. John tells us why God pulls back this warmth, why he lets imitators shine for a while, why he darkens the very powers that once carried his light. And he said is for this: the soul that keeps walking when the gifts goes quiet is often the one most ready for union. In 2 rather short chapters, St. John pauses to guide us along this ridge, chapters 3 and 4. Behind us is the first night, the training of the senses. In that season, God used sweetness to teach the lower part of the soul to follow the Spirit. Ahead is the deeper valley, the night of the Spirit itself. And here, God does not just comfort, he remakes us. St. John calls these souls proficients. They have tasted God. Prayer once felt alive. Tears came easy. Scripture felt warm in the hands. God allowed that. He let the joy spill down into the senses so that the whole person would learn to lean on and to love what the Spirit loves. And he uses a simple picture that it is like a house becoming one table. Both parts of the soul eat the same food and from the same dish. And when a house eats together, it can suffer together. The sweetness, though, is not the goal. It is alignment. But then St. John says something hard. The first night was more like correction than deep cleansing. Why? Because the deepest mess is not the senses. It sits deeper in the spirit. It hides in quiet pride, subtle control, and the urge to hold even holy things for ourselves. And so God goes deeper. He goes to the roots. He touches the will where choices begin. He touches the mind where meaning lights up. And there he starts purging, and it feels like loss. In the night of sense, you are weaned. In the night of spirit, you are emptied. The first takes away excess. The second uproots attachment. The first teaches you to want less. The second teaches you to want in a new way. St. John is honest about how this feels. God strips the soul, he says. The mind goes dark and it cannot grab God with ideas. The will goes dry and it cannot taste God the way it used to. The memory goes quiet, and it cannot comfort itself with old feelings. The soul feels constrained, even bitter. But St. John says this is not God moving away. It is God moving closer, and in a way the soul has not learned to bear yet, union by pure faith. To make room for that, God removes every smaller support. Then St. John turns back to his poem that he is writing throughout the book, and in effect, he says, now you will hear the same song at a deeper level. He goes back to the beginning of his poem and starts repeating it again. The dark night is not only a mood, it is God's hidden work. God moves through the house of the soul and puts out the lights we relied on. And here's where we pick up with chapter 4. It begins with the soul speaking. It says, it went out into the dark night, kindled with love, unseen, while its house was at rest. And St. John explains what this means. The mind is dark. There are no bright lights to lean on. The will aches. It wants God, but feels only the desire. The memory is quiet. There is no warm replay of old moments. The soul is bare. And yet, one ember burns. The will is touched by longing for God. Outwardly, the soul feels poor. Inwardly, it is lit by clean desire. And here's the paradox. The soul calls this a happy chance. Why? Because when the old lights go out, the one true longing shines even clearer. The soul does not go out because it sees, it goes out because it burns. St. John says the soul goes out from its old way of knowing and loving. This is not self-hate, it is self-surpassing. God is not trying to crush the soul. He's trying to lift it into his own way of acting. The mind will learn to know God's wisdom, not by its own little lamp. The will learn to love with strength given by the Spirit, not by shaking feeling. Even the memory will stretch towards what lasts. God empties to fill. God darkens to give a truer light. God wounds to wed. And in St. John's poem, he has this line, my house be now at rest. And it matters. The lower part of the soul is quite enough for the soul to slip out unseen. Old cravings do not rule the room. The noise is lower. The door is open. So chapters 3 and chapters 4 show a love that feels like loss but aims at union. What begins with a shared dish ends with a shared life. Now this night is painful, but it is the painfulness of the brightness of God, who will not let us love him cheaply. And now we are at the threshold. St. John has walked us into a dim room where God purifies. We watch the soul lose its old toys, its old speech, its old tasting of grace. And St. John calls it putting off the old man and putting on the new man. And he says God sometimes loves us best when he darkens the windows. Now, it's not just St. John's mystical idea. We do have New Testament for this. Listen to what Paul has to say. When Paul says, when I was a child, and then later he says, I gave up childish ways. He is naming this move from earthly faith to mature love. That's in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. When he says, put off the old self, put on the new, he is describing the same stripping and remaking in Ephesians chapter 4. When he says we carry treasures in jars of clay, he is naming the strange strength that shows up when we feel weak. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And when he says, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me, he is naming the heart of the night, the stepping aside of self so that the divine light can rise. Galatians chapter 2. St. John whispered it in the cloister, and Paul also thundered it in the church. It's the same motion. God takes a soul that is clutched by holy trinkets and teaches it to stand upright in the truer light. So let's go through some of these passages together. 1 Corinthians 13, 11, and 12. Paul says there's a childish stage, and then there's a grown stage. In early faith, God often gives pictures and comforts we can hold. and that is a mercy. But Paul says a time comes to put away childish things. We see dimly, like looking into a foggy mirror, but we see we have to look that way before we see face to face. And that is the dark night. It's not a punishment. It's transition. God is not taking love away. He's training the eyes for a closer look at the sun. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 22 through 24. Paul says, put off the old self and put on the new. The old self is not only obvious sins, of course it's that. It is the old desires, old control, old grabbing, even for holy things. And so God pulls that garment off in the dark when he tries the soul. It can feel like being left naked. But Paul says the new self is created after God's likeness. It's not an improved self. It's created. That is why God empties us. He is making space for something we cannot make ourselves. The third passage is 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 7 through 11. Paul says we hold treasures in clay jars. That means the power is God's, not ours. And the night we feel like clay, plain, fragile, chipped, and we cannot make light on demand. And that's the point. When you keep turning toward God without the sweetness, something shines that is clearly not you. The jar glows from the inside. Paul even says we can be pressed and confused, but not crushed. Death works in us so life can show. And this is the shape of this night. Loss that makes room for deeper life. We are earthen vessels. We have to accept that about ourselves. And that makes room so that we can carry this treasure of God in us. Galatians chapter 2, 19 through 20. Paul says, not I, but Christ in me. This is like the quiet one stepping out into the unseen. The old I that wanted to control is slowly crucified. The soul can no longer say, I will know God on my own terms. It cannot say, I will feel God when I want. No, this is Christ in me, not I. Space opens up in the soul, and in that space, Christ lives. Christ thinks in us. Christ loves through us. Christ endures in us. And Paul says this new life is lived by faith in the Son of God who loved him. That is the night language, trusting without the big fireworks, not I, but Christ. You get the same kind of picture from 4 different angles. It's childhood to maturity, old clothes to new, clay holding radiance, I to Christ. The dark night is not a side path for a few mystics. It really is the gospel turned inward into your own heart. So if this is what God does, it cannot stay just simply on the page. It has to land in your life and in mine. Dry prayer will come. Confusing seasons happen. The hidden heart aches. The question is not only what does it mean? It is how do we live in this darkness without panic? And here's what we do as we can look at the lives of St. John and St. Paul. There are times when the holiest thing you can do is stop striving. Not stop loving, not stop believing, but stop trying to furnish your own sense of God. Stop forcing sound into the silence. Stop trying to light the room where God is darkening it. The night is God's turn. So, in application, I'm not going to teach you a bunch of new tricks to hack your own spirituality. Tricks are you taking your turn back. This is about reverent stillness. It is about letting your house be at rest. And there are a couple different ways you can look at this. First, receive the season and don't rush to fix it. The dark night season feels like failure. Prayer used to be warmed, now it feels wooden. Scripture used to spark, now it feels flat. We think, what did I break? Sometimes nothing is broken. God just moved you to a deeper room. So just pray, Lord, if this is how you love me right now, I receive it. Keep this thing playing. That one line will open your clenched fist. It keeps you from chasing the old toys of spiritual life just to feel something. It keeps you from assuming God left you. Dryness can be dryness. Not knowing can be not knowing. Dimness can be dimness. Do not add the second pain of self-blame. Second way you can apply this, just sit in quiet availability. If God is doing the work, your job is to be reachable. Take 5 or 10 minutes each day, sit upright, hands relaxed, breathe slow, then offer one short prayer, here am I, or Jesus, or the Jesus prayer. Jesus, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Do not force images. Do not chase thoughts. And when distractions come, even if an angel appears to you, just ignore it. Come back to the prayer. That is what it means to let your house be at rest. You are telling your inner noise to hush so that you can stay open to God. Even if you feel nothing, you have loved God by showing up. And lovers just do that. In those quiet minutes, God can be doing a deep work in you that you cannot feel. Clay jars do not feel treasures settle, but they do settle inside. Third application is this: let faith, not feeling, define the prayer. In these seasons, the big challenge is this: from I felt God, so I prayed, to I trust God, so I pray. After a dry time, do not say, that was useless. Say, that was faith. Faith is choosing God in the dark. Faith is empty hands that do not quit. Also, refuse the spiral of self-checking. Was that deep? Did I do it right? Am I growing? That is the old self just trying to stay in charge. Let faith answer that. God was there. I turned towards him. That is enough for today. Fruit shows up later. Cleaner love, gentler speech, a quieter ego. Not because you forced it, but because God did the moving in you. Now, in all of this, the point is just tender. God may already be speaking to you. You are learning not to speak over him. The dark night lowers the volume of the soul so God's whisper can be heard. If your prayer right now feels like empty hands in a quiet room, you are not alone. Stay there. Let your house be at rest. The one who loved you and gave himself for you knows how to walk in when all your lights are off. Now that's where we're going to end for today. Thanks for spending this time with me on the Distracted Christian Podcast. I know you could have filled this hour with anything, really. So the fact that you chose to sit with St. John on the Cross and this strange, beautiful idea of God loving you through dryness really does matter. A huge thanks to Anton Koryukov for the theme music. He's the one making me sound wiser and calmer than I actually am. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts, make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And if this helped you even a little bit, leave a rating or share it with someone who's wondering where God is and why it feels quiet right now. For show notes, more reflections, and theological rabbit holes, head over to freshgroundtheology.com. That's where I park extras, and you can listen to our main flagship podcast called Fresh Ground Theology, and we go into a lot of biblical nerdery on that podcast. I'm, of course, Nate Labdorf, and thank you for listening. Stay faithful in the quiet, and I'll see you next time. Special thanks to Anton Koryukov for today's theme music on the show. Tune in to hear more next time. Thanks for listening.